You're watching theAnalysis-news, and I'm your host, Talia Baroncelli. I'll shortly be joined by French-Palestinian sociologist Sari Hanafi. We'll be discussing the results of the French parliamentary elections and how French President Emmanuel Macron is trying to prevent the left-wing alliance from governing in French Parliament. We'll also be discussing the weaponization of claims of antisemitism against the left-wing alliance in France, and particularly against Jean-Luc Mélenchon's party, France Unbowed. If you'd like to support the work we do, please go to our website, theAnalysis-news. You can hit the donate button at the top right corner of the screen and make sure you're on our mailing list. That way you're always up to date every time a new episode is published. You can like and subscribe to the show on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, or other podcast streaming services. See you in a bit with Sari Hanafi. I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Sari Hanafi. He is a professor of sociology at the American University of Beirut and is the director of the Center of Arab and Middle Eastern Studies. He is also French of Palestinian origin, and he recently finished writing a book on the crisis of liberal democracy. The book is called Against Symbolic Liberalism, a Plea for Dialogic Sociology. So thank you so much for joining me again, Sari.
Thank you, Talia. Pleasure to be with you.
So I wanted to speak to you about the results of the French parliamentary elections, as the results took a lot of people by surprise. The left-wing alliance, the New Popular Front, was able to get 182 seats. And this alliance is comprised of 4 different political parties, including Jean-Luc Mélenchon's France Unbowed. Interestingly enough, Macron, who is the president who called the snap elections, his Ensemble or Together coalition only got 168 seats. And Le Pen's far-right party, the National Rally, got 143 seats. So no one political bloc was able to attain an absolute majority of 289 seats out of 577 seats. So what actually happened in the end? How was the left able to keep the far right at bay?
Yeah, actually, it was a beautiful surprise, at least for me, that the New Popular Front win in the head of the other. Well, let me say first, the outcome of the result is very alarming because we know now that around 10 million of French voted for Le Pen and for the RN, National Rally. So let me start by this, that it's it means that we are going into a very difficult time where, if you like, some values, Republican values, will be on trouble with this arrival of this group. I am trying not to use the word far right for Le Pen party. Simply, I like it or I don't like it. I respect the decision of a big chunk of the French. If the group is represented by the third of the population, we cannot say anymore far right. I mean, this is a way of vilifying the other. I can always denounce this group. I would say some of their values are close to fascism, but I'm very careful to use the word far right. Far is a measurement of popularity, if you like. It means that either far right or far left, it means that they are not really well represented. So I abstain of using this. So
we're going to get into that a bit more later, because I would just to push back a little, because the state council in France recently made a decision on this very issue, the Conseil d'État, because Le Pen, who's leading the National Rally, she said that this designation or this descriptor of far right used against her party by not only politicians but also in the media was excessive or not accurate. But in fact, the state council made a decision saying that this descriptor could in fact be used for her party, despite the fact that her party has tried to distance itself from the previous party which it came out of, which was the National Front, and trying to distance itself from her father, who fought in the Algerian War and definitely espoused some very fascist views. In fact, he said that the Nazi concentration camps, which killed and exterminated so many Jews was just a detail of World War II history. So I don't know if I personally would agree with not using that term, but we can definitely get into that more. But
maybe I will give you my take. If you like,
okay.
First, I think the High Council in France, our High Court, took a liberal position. And I mean by liberal position that we cannot force people to use this word, because this word by itself is not a slur. It's not insult. Okay? It's a description. I would say it's a bad description. And we will come to how Mélenchon has been described. I mean, so I have a lot to say about how media play this labeling things. But from liberal point of view, it's very difficult to have a judicial decision on it. I mean, to say, I cannot, I don't know, call X or Y, something like that, as far as it's considered not an insult by itself. So if you like, this is how I see things. I mean, we will come to the question of labeling, because this is very, very alarming. And this is, if you like, my whole book is about this. I mean, somehow. So I was saying that this is the first, if you like, outcome. We got the second outcome, that really people, they don't believe at all with the Macronism. And Macronism, it means that playing in the center, it means that satisfy really the wealthy, fortunes, the big corporations. Against, if you like, a mass of the French who have been impoverished in the last 7-8 years, okay, in France. So, and remember all the social movement we have. So that the second outcome, that nobody believe on Macron. Macron become really, it's a minority group in the parliament. The third outcome is that the big winner, I would say, is the left. And left with the coalition between France Unbowed of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, but also the Green, the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, for all this coalition. Okay, so and I think this coalition have a clear economic agenda. I went through this program before I vote, and really I found that it's not a wishful thinking. It's something a real program, actually supported by some French renowned economists like Piketty and Thomas Piketty and others. So, if you like, it's not something as the media and Macron described it, like a radical and will flee the investment itself. So and it's not true that this program is anti-European. Now, when Europe, the European Commission highlight how or warn France that their deficit go beyond the acceptable rate 3%, and currently the deficit of France is 5.5%. It's clear with the program of Jean-Luc Mélenchon particularly, but there is if you like, in this regard, there is no difference with the others, that we can increase the minimum wage, if you like, the universal basic income, and then we can tax the big corporation. We can tax those who are really hyper rich in France, and this exists. And so now all the scandal worldwide, how not only in France, in all this Western country, United States, Canada, how something like 1% of population. They have around 90% of assets, or 80%, or 60%, or 70%. So there is something really with the concentration of wealth is very alarming. And France Unbowed really they have a clear plan about this. So if you like, it means that the French people, they say enough is enough to Macronism. We want a new political plan and more honest politicians. So if you like, this is how I read the election with this 3 point, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Macron was always saying that there has to be pension reform, that there isn't enough money to pay workers a certain amount, and that they shouldn't be able to retire at a younger age. So his argument was always that the purchasing power or the budget of the French National Assembly could not account for improving the living conditions and working conditions of the average French person or person living in France, working in France. So I guess the sentiments that most people have in France belies this argument. But I do want to ask you about Emmanuel Macron, the French president, not picking a prime minister. So constitutionally, he doesn't have to immediately pick a prime minister after the elections, but at some point he has to. And his prime minister, Gabriel Attal, immediately after the election results came out on Sunday, did offer to resign. Macron then said that he would not accept that resignation. And it almost seems like he is potentially engineering a coup. What would you say to that? How is he saying that no one has won this election? How do you assess what Macron's doing?
It's difficult to call it, I think, a coup, because the constitution in this regard is ambiguous, if you like. But in France, you have a clear-cut Republican tradition. And you see, I am using so much in this interview the word Republican because they French love that, and Macron particularly, he shunned this republicanism, and you remember his law against separatists, in the idea that everyone live in France should be Republicans. Okay, so I play the game, if you like. That in his republicanism there is tradition, and we see it with the Mitterrand, we see it with the Chirac, where it was the president come from a majority different from the parliament majority, and automatically Mitterrand and Chirac they choose the party who got more the seats. So obviously, should the new Popular Front to have this opportunity, but Macron, in this regard, is playing unethical politics, if you like. This is how I qualify it. And instead of saying anti-constitutional, I would say it's unethical politics.
And we should maybe just explain why, because what he's doing is saying that no single party has attained any sort of majority. So if you look at the parties themselves, it was the far-right party, if we can use that term, the National Rally, that attained 127 seats. Macron's Renaissance Party attained 104 seats. And if you look at the largest party within the Left Alliance, France Unbowed, they achieved something like 74 seats or something to that.
But this is the point that there, again, there is a Republican tradition. The Republican tradition, you talk about the coalesce group. You don't look for and this
exactly. You don't look at the individual parties. You look at the alliance. If you look at the alliance, the left got 186 seats.
Yeah, exactly. And if you like, this is what we find in Germany. This is what we find everywhere, if you like. By the way, you have. I looked to the statistics a few years ago, 3 years ago, when I was preparing my book, that around 68% of countries worldwide is governed by coalition. So the idea of coalition is the rule and not the exception. And if you look to this coalition, how some rules, rule of thumbs you have is that the biggest group will take the lead on this, if you like. So this is why I describe this like unethical politics, because in any case, this is really it should be obvious mathematically. I mean, you give the biggest group the possibility to find other smaller groups, even if the difference is one seat. As you know, as a Palestinian, I follow closely the Israeli elections, and often you have really the difference is one seat between a group and group, and the Israeli president will automatically choose the biggest coalition. Okay, so once a coalition is declared, you cannot escape this coalition. Okay, so this is why I think Macron is. What is funny that it's the opposite of his argument why he resolved the parliament and called for a new election, because he felt that there is a new feeling of the French, and this should be respected after the European election. You know, in the European election also, Macron took a heavy coup. He got much less seats in European Parliament than before. So if really he thinks like that, he should follow these rules. But again, he is, as a politician, unethical.
Well, he was the one who decided to call for these snap elections in the first place. Why do you think he did that? Was he just trying to perhaps
this is a very good question.
Like the right and the left try to get them to scramble? Or, I mean, he did say that he wanted to clarify the position of the French people. But
absolutely. This is, I think he is maneuvering and not true at all what he declared. Actually, the remaining time for the new election is almost 2 years and a half. The new presidential election in France in 2027. So he knows any political parties will govern in this very difficult moment of France. This, if you like, French dissatisfaction of their government, a lot of social demands that any party will be grilled, and he thought that he will grill. He was much more interested in grilling the National Rally. Why? Because National Rally is a real threat to, if you like, to his political parties in 2027. So he thought he will discredit the National Party and the what he called far right. They will not win the presidential election. Remember that France is really presidential regime. So the president has a lot of power, not only in domestic affairs, but a lot on foreign affairs. So this is why there is a lot of issue at stakes in 2027. So he sought to grill the party. Now, even with this logic, he really don't want to give any platform, if you like, for Mélenchon. Why? Maybe it's time to talk about that. It's an horrible, if you like, labeling waged not only by him, by the media, claiming that he's anti-Semitic, claiming that He is very radical. He is, I think, using all these labels to destroy the enemy. If you like, this is what I describe now in our late modernity and in the crisis of liberal democracy, this societal intolerance. I mean, and the chilling climate of polarization. I mean, and you kill you kill your enemy, killing it not by political assassination anymore, killing your enemy by media. And just to remember Carl Schmitt, where he described Carl Schmitt, the famous, if you like, Nazi philosopher, political scientist in the time of Hitler, where he has a very interesting description. What is the politics in that time? The politics is between foes and enemies, between friends and enemies. That there is no one is neutral. You are in the opposing side. You are my enemy, so I need to kill you. And he showed that how political field is so violent in the time of Weimar Republic in Germany. Now, if you like, this is what we see in France. That look, a few days ago, I have a conversation with a dear friend, Ghassan Al-Haj. Ghassan Al-Haj is a Lebanese-Australian famous anthropologist. Ghassan did his PhD during the Lebanese Civil War. And he went to interview within his environment in Maronite area in the eastern Beirut. And at certain point, one of his right-wing Maronite guy was saying that Palestinians wanted to take over Lebanon and to create from Lebanon a substitute homeland. And then Ghassan Al-Haj asked simply, do you have any evidence? And with a little bit of silence, the guy, he told him, I will go to my car to get my revolver. So I will kill you. So this kind of reply is what you see today. How people like Macron use the antisemitism, weaponize it to kill the enemy. It's so absurd. You see how we reply to each other. I ask for evidence. You want to kill me, and this is how I feel today. Just 3 days ago, the renowned political scientist in France, François Bourga, he was arrested by the police because there is a court case against him, apology of terrorism. Of course, who did this complaint? Sorry, is a European Jewish associations, is the same which did it against Reem Al-Hassan, number 3 in the political party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. So it's a kind of political assassination, but again, not in a physical meaning, that you try to assassinate your enemy. And this is a point. I have a discussion a few days ago where with I was in Oslo giving a talk about Gaza, the war on Gaza, and one of the person in the audience, he keep repeating statistics how anti-Semitism today is in high rise in Europe. And so no way to stop him before telling him, look, I mean, the way it's a lecture about the war on Gaza, and he come with telling me that there is a rise of anti-Semitism. I told him exactly like we imagined in 1960s, like somebody like you, French, say Algerians are anti-French.
And I can just add, I mean, the left-wing coalition came out repeatedly against anti-Semitism. In fact, in their campaign manifesto, it says, anti-Semitism has a tragic history in our country that must not be repeated. All those who spread hatred of Jews must be fought. So they have a clear position against anti-Semitism, against targeting Jews, against making disparaging or disrespectful comments against Jews. But of course, the question is, how do we define anti-Semitism? Which definition do we use? If we're equating critique of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism, then those lines get blurred. So this is where people in the center, or, you know, the extreme center, if you want to call it, and Macron's party, as well as people on the right, start using this definition of anti-Semitism to discredit the entire left and to discredit Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Yeah. The first interview Macron did, why he banned the demonstration, pro-Palestinian demonstration in France, he said that he considered that Palestinian flag and the kufiya is anti-Semitic. And then when the journalist probed, he said, because put the Jewish community into stress or something like that. You see, I mean, this kind, who's have the right to be stressed and who's have the right not to be stressed? 2 million of people on Gaza, I mean, either displaced or so far we have almost 40,000 killed. I mean, is there stress? It's the word stress and distress. I mean, being in distress and not having safe, not feeling safety, if you like. All this kind of vocabulary that we hear it today, that really how the intolerant of debate, how you cancel the other. It's really cancel culture. We often say this is the left who cancel the culture, don't want to respect the mainstream politicians, which sometimes this is true. But now it's really the right wing, the way they are doing it is terrible way, and Macron is really part of this cancel culture, if you like, canceling the Palestinian in this meaning.
And Jordan Bardella, who's also leading the national rally, he would, I mean, if his coalition had gained the most seats in the recent second round of elections, then Macron would have to pick Jordan Bardella as the prime minister. That, of course, didn't happen. But after the elections, Jordan Bardella said that the left-wing alliance, the left-wing coalition, which gained the most amount of seats, was the extreme left, or extreme gauche, as he said, and said that it was a coalition of dishonor. So again, here he's also weaponizing those claims of anti-Semitism and calling the left extreme. We'll get to this language around far left and far right, but I wanted to stay on anti-Semitism just for the time being. Within the left-wing alliance itself, are these accusations also launched against Jean-Luc Mélenchon? Because he's also quite divisive among the parties within the left-wing coalition.
Yeah, actually, you are right. I mean, even in some socialist party, we hear that the way they talk about Mélenchon, but they end up coalesce with him. If you like, it's we should admit that the mainstream political parties in France, they are really pro settler colonial Israeli agenda, as simple as that. France is still selling arms to Israel until today. So as simple as that. If you like, today, if we have a prime minister socialist, I am not sure they will stop selling arms to Israel, even if the UN claimed that it's plausible to have that it's a genocidal war in Gaza. So yes, I'm not sure the only, if you like, Macron or the right wing, they are pro-Israelis. So this is, if you like, we need to shift the debate now. The major issue at stake is not true about the anti-Semitism, as you said. I mean, they even Jordan Bardella and National Rally, it's true in the last 20 years, there is a complete shift in the discourse vis-a-vis anti-Semitism. And why? Because simply the enemy of the enemy is a friend. So the enemy of the Muslims, if you like, they become a friend. So the Islamophobia, this is really the biggest the biggest phenomenon today in France. Again, I am not discarding also the rise of anti-Semitism, that we need to be vigilant about it and we need to denounce it. But if you like, today, quantitatively, if we look to the incidents in many European countries, I mean, Islamophobia come really to the top, and unfortunately not only in Europe, but in United States, in India as well, etc. So this is the biggest phenomenon. So coming back to anti-Semitism, so I think now there is absolutely a consensus among all political class in France against anti-Semitism. But nevertheless, as you mentioned, it's remain a currency to destroy the other. Okay, this is a key word, to destroy. Once you said you are anti-Semite, you are destroyed, if you like. And so this is, if you like, the situation where we are. And maybe this is time, Talia, that I talk a little bit about National Rally ideology. I think they are really dangerous in terms of bringing a very racist, chauvinistic nationalism to French, raising the question that they will not give any sensitive position to double nationality people. Okay, so and again we discover that his advisor, the advisor of Jordan Bardella, is someone who is a Russian and a French in the same time. Is his top political advisor. So, but again, in the mind of Bardella, it's very interesting. Those who are the treason doesn't come from the European space, and I would say not from the Christian space, but from the other space. It's from North Africa. I mean, when Bardella talk about that, it's really hint particularly about North Africa, and of course with a lot of thought. How I mean, they wrote a draft law, not yet submitted to Parliament, that they want to denaturalize anyone who have a thought, not action, even a thought. If you in your speech you are against the Republican values, and this is, if you like, this is amazing. France is the only country in the world where you see this concept, Republican values. I mean, I know what is liberal values. I mean, there is a universal liberal values, but Republican values, I mean, it's something that it changed how people define the republicanism. So, now French secularism, laïcité, is under heavy scrutiny because it's anti-foreign religion laïcity. So you have a very racist, if you like, laïcité in France. So what is Republican values? So this is where the National Rally is playing this game. And this is, in this meaning, no need for me to say whether they are far right or not right, but they have a really clearly a fascist and Islamophobic and exclusionary agenda to those who don't, who are different, who refuse to be part of the cultural majoritarianism, and those who refuse to be to go to the path of the assimilation.
But what you're doing is also, if I could say so myself, weaponizing laïcité. So this idea of laïcité and this law came about in 1905. So this idea of having a secular society is something that's very prevalent in France and is also ensured in many different, public spaces. So a lot of this has become more controversial, where in certain workspaces, women are not allowed to, or Muslim women are not allowed to wear a veil anymore. So they're saying that this is French secularism. But in a sense, what they're trying to impose is actually Judeo-Christian values as opposed to secularism by prioritizing or valorizing those values and excluding a pluralist society, which would obviously include people of different faiths and different political dispositions and sexual orientations. So their idea of secularism is also very distorted, is it not?
Absolutely. Talia, even not a Judeo-Christian values, if you like. They are imposing a certain reformation, reform Christianity. A Christianity where confined to a private spheres where you have a individual conscience, that your conscience is with God. So this is a personal thing, plus some ritual you can exercise it in the church. Beyond this, you cannot carry any sign. But all this is a big lie. I mean, that in France, whenever you go, you find places, squares where you have a cross. But again, I don't consider this against secularism. But just to say that even they have an image of reformed Christianity, and they want to define the other religion accordingly. So any religion. So in this meaning, the Sikh, the turban, the turban of the Sikh, is against laicity, because it's also a religious sign according to this way of defining what is allowed or not as allowed in the public spheres. And I would say historically France is really is outlier. I mean that the worldwide secularism is much more tolerant, is accommodational of religious signs. They are really defined like a principal distance between a state and religion, or if you like, a minimal neutrality of the state vis-a-vis the others. So this is where you find it elsewhere. In Denmark, in the constitution is written that the queen or the king should be part of the Anglican church. But nobody felt that this is anti-secularism, because this is the Danish traditions. You go to Denmark and you see really nobody impose on you any values, even if it is taught in the schools. In the last 20 years in Denmark, it changed from only catechism or teaching this Anglican religion to allow Muslims, Sikh, Buddhists, etc., to have their own teaching. So France, in this meaning, is really an outlier. And every time you have an election, you raise this issue and to galvanize the public opinion and to make people more nationalist, and it pays. We tell the truth. I mean, this is how National Front, the National Rally, they got more vote, and this is how Macron galvanized the French public opinion with his law against separatists.
You've just been watching part 1 of my discussion with Sari Hanafi. In part 2, we'll be continuing this discussion on what the labels far right and far left actually mean, and how anti-Semitism has been used to target the left and to discredit the left in France and in other European countries. See you next time.